Hello everyone, this is Hidden Planet X, and today we're going to do a deck tech on Ghave, Guru of Spores, for the MTG format of Commander. So, Ghave is a legendary fungus shaman for 2 and an Abzan. He enters with 5 +1/+1 counters on him, and you can pay 1, remove a counter to make a sapling, and you can pay 1, sacrifice a creature, and put a +1/+1 on target creature, not just himself. So there's a bunch of different things you can do with Ghave. I chose to do more of a hard control. I'm not going to say hard control, but it's more control-y and with a bit of combo as a finisher. But a lot of people also like running in tokens, which is another viable thing, but this is more control. We'll be going through the different choices I made through the deck, and we'll be starting with enchantments since I do run a fair amount. So first up is Aura Shards, 1, and then Selesnya. For whenever creature enters under your control, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. Really good with Ghave out. You can pay 2 mana and just take out an artifact or enchantment. You can do it at instant speed, and it's just an all-around good card. Really good against Voltron strategies or just anything with a lot of artifacts or enchantment. Next up, Awakening Zone. Now this is, I will call it more of a tech card because it's kind of underperforming at the moment, and I might consider cutting it and changing it to something else. But for 2 and a green, you get an enchantment that gives you a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn at the beginning of your upkeep. It's not bad. I'm running a few Grave Pact effects, so that way it at least gives you a body. And if you do get it out early enough, it will ramp you. So that's why I haven't taken it out yet. Next up, we have Black Market. This is the newest addition actually to the deck. I just finally got it after they released the pre-con, so I've been testing it. I don't know how well it works, but in theory it should. It's 3 and 2 black for enchantment that whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter, and at your pre-combat main you get black mana equal to the amount of charge counters on it. So with Ghave, you can, if you don't have anything to do, you can just start cycling saplings, getting a bunch of counters on this. And there are a few mana sinks in the deck and some decently high costed things, so the black mana is never bad. Next up, Cathar's Crusade, 3 and 2 white for enchantment. Whenever a creature enters under your control, it gets a +1. Each creature gets a +1/+1. So this is part of one of the combos in the deck. I guess I'll explain it now. Cathar's Crusade with Ghave and Ashnod's Altar is an infinite mana combo with infinite death triggers as well. So if you have Blood Artist or Woodfall Primus or stuff like that that cares about things dying, it's an infinite combo. Next up, Fecundity, 2 and a green for enchantment. Whenever a creature dies, its controller draws a card. Now, this is a universal effect, so you have to be careful about it, but often with Ghave, it reads 2 mana, draw a card, so it's really hard to pass up. Next up, Grave Pact, 1 and 3 black enchantment. Whenever a creature you control dies, each other player sacrifices a creature. Really good with Ghave. It basically just lets you clear the board of all creatures. Like, yeah, against mass token strategies, it can be a little daunting, but with Ghave, you really can easily chip away at them. And once they're down to the last creature, they can't play creatures for the rest of the game without removing one of the 2. Next up is Land Tax. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control less lands, you can search for up to 3 basics and put them in your hand. It's not ramp, but it is fixing. Now, my mana base is not perfect, and I'm running a pretty greedy 3-color deck, so it's just really good to fix your mana. Next up is Mirari's Wake, for 3 and Selesnya. Creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever you tap a land for mana, it adds an additional mana of any type it could produce. It doubles doubles your mana and buffs your team in case you do want to go a little wider. So, nice card. Next up, Parallelize, 3 and a green for if an effect would put one or more tokens on the battlefield, put twice as many. So I'm not running doubling season. I felt like Parallelize did just what I needed to, and doubling season just drew all the hate. You kind of want in this deck. You kind of want to be sitting back because you often don't have too many creatures to like stop them from swinging in. So you just kind of want to sit back and not look threatening, and this makes you look a little less threatening. Next up, Phyrexian Arena, 1 and 2 black. For at the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card, lose a life. Just a card draw spell. Life's generally not relevant in Commander. So, if again, I've tried some other effects, and again, this just does it well. Just does it best. 2 cards a turn for the measly cost of 1 life. You can't really beat it. Next up, Sterling Grove for a Selesnya. It has all other enchantments you control Shroud, and you can pay 1, sacrifice it, search your library for an enchantment card, and then put it on. So, it's a tutor. It lets me grab my Aura Shards, my Black Market, my Cathars Crusade, my Grave Pack. So, it's just a really nice tutor effect, and it stops them from blowing my other things up. So, good card. Next up, Sylvan Library. 1 in a green. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw at the beginning of your draw set, you draw 2 additional cards. And if you want to keep the extra cards, you have to pay 4 life per card. So, really good if you have a shuffle effect, which the deck does run a few. And if not, just pay 8 life, draw 2 extra cards, and just start digging. So, that finishes my enchantments. We'll move on to sorceries next. Cultivate, 2 in a green, search your library for 2 basic lands, put 1 to the battlefield, tap 1 in your hand. Good ramp spell, and it gets you a land for the next turn if you don't have it. Decree of Pain, destroy all creatures, draw a card for each creature destroyed this way. Really nice late game board wipe if the board getting cluttered. It just draws you basically a bunch of cards. Even if it draws you 3 cards, it's worth it. And it also has the ability to cycle for 3 and 2 black. When you cycle this card, all creatures get -2/-2. Really nice effect as well. If you don't have the mana to cast the 8-drop Wrath, you can always cycle it. You can cycle this at instant speed, which is really nice. So it really gives combat an issue, as well as no one can counter this as So if you're running against hard control, you can't kill the -2/-2. And against like Talrand decks where they're just a bunch of 2/2 flyers, it's a really nice card. Next up, Demonic Tutor, 1 in a black, search your library for a card, put it in your hand. You just really can't say no. It's one of the best cards in the format if you're running black. It just finds anything you need to. So, next up, Diabolic Revelations for X, 3 and 2 black. You can tutor up X cards. So, yeah, it's not going to help you in the early game, but late game when you have Mirari's Wake or, I don't know, just a bunch of lands itself, you can tutor up 3, 4, 5 cards, and if they can't kill you or you stop them from doing anything, it just means you win the game. So, next up, Explosive Vegetation, 3 and a green. Search for 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield tab. More ramp. I do run a lot of permanent destruction and some. I don't really care too much for artifact and enchantment a ramp because there's a lot of artifact and enchantment hate, but there's not a lot of land hate in my meta. So that's why I went for more of a land ramp than I did artifact or enchantment. Artifact, basically. Next up, Harmonize, 2 and 2 green for draw 3. You're not in blue, so this really just draws you extra cards for a good price. Living Death. Now, this is a card that I've considered cutting, but the effect is really good. It also technically helps if you're in multiplayer and you can kind of, talk with the other players and kind of say, Alright, I'm gonna give you back your stuff. Now kill this person. Now, it has each player exiles all creature cards from his or her graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures on the board, and then puts all of the exiled creatures back on the field. So it swaps your graveyard and your field. I do run a few ways of exiling graveyards, so at least that way it's more one-sided. Next up, Merciless Eviction 4 and white-black. Choose one, exile artifacts, or creatures, or enchantments, or planeswalkers. Again, just a really good utility wrath. It also exiles, which is really nice against indestructible things. And I've used every mode at least once in my time. Next up is Ranger's Path for 3 and a green. Search your library for up to 2 forest cards and put them on the battlefield tab. So that way it can get you into your shop or any of your other lands. Next up, Toxic Deluge, 2 and a black. At an additional cost, you pay X life, and all creatures get -X till end of turn. It's, again, really good. It'll clear away a lot of the threats early game, get rid of indestructibles. Like, yeah, sometimes you have to cast it for 11 life to kill stuff, but generally it's worth it. And then classic Wrath of God. 2 and 2 white, destroy all creatures, they can't be regenerated. Nothing wrong with a Wrath of God. Okay, that's finished up sorceries. We'll again move on to creatures. First up, Acidic Slime. Really nice ETB. It's a 2/2 ooze for 3 and 2 green. Death Toucher, and when it enters, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. Really nice ETB, and I have some ways to use ETBs. You'll see later on how I can use them. Next up, Ashen Rider, 4 and 2 white and 2 black for a 5/5 flyer that when it enters or dies, exile target permanent. Again, it's really expensive, so that's why I'm including a lot of ramps, but man, if you can get that back with Living End or a few other ways to recur it and then kill it and recur it again, it's just really nice feeling. And the 5/5 body is not bad either. Next up, Avacyn, Angel of Hope, 5 and triple white for an 8/8 flying vigilance, indestructible, and all other permanents you control are indestructible. I mean, again, you can't really say no to playing an Avacyn. It stops board wipes on your side, so can't say no. Bane of Progress, 4 and 2 green for a 2/2 elemental. When it enters, destroy all artifacts and enchantments, and it gets a +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment destroyed this way. So yes, this is another unilateral effect, and I am running quite a few artifacts or enchantments, but often I can, again, just kind of lay low, not play much out, and then just wipe the board while getting a giant elemental out. Next up, Blood Artist. This is one of my ways to kill people with my infinite loop. For 1 and a black, you get a 0/1 vampire. Whenever it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So with a Cathar's Crusade and this out, you can kill everyone. So that's nice. Next up, Butcher of Malakir. For 5 and 2 black, you get a 5/4 vampire warrior with flying. When it or another creature dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. It's Grave Pact on a stick. It's a really nice effect. The flying sometimes is useful, but just a really good card. Next up, Corpsejack Menace, 2 black-green for a 4/4 fungus. If one or more +1/+1 counters are placed on a creature you control, put twice that many on it instead. So this is the other half of your... I'm blanking on the name, I said it earlier. On your doubling season, sorry about that. And again, it also makes people a little unassuming. It makes Ghave come in as a 10/10, and it nets you counters every time you go through the loop. So, all in all, a good card. Next up, Farhaven Elf, 2 in a green, 1/1 Elf Druid. When it enters, search the library for a basic land card, put on the battlefield tap, and shuffle. It's a ramp spell. It's an extra body for Ghave to eat if it needs to get bigger. again, just more ramp. Next up, Fleshbag Marauder 2 and a Plaque for a 3/1 zombie warrior when it enters each player sacrifice execution. Again, really good with Ghave and all the different ways to kill things. Like, I've tutored this thing up quite a few times against Voltron commanders, against hexproof creatures. Like, it's an edict is really good. Then moving on to Mikaeus. Mikaeus the Unhallowed is one of the more recent additions to the deck. I've been testing them out. What do you get for 3 and triple black? You get a 5/5 zombie cleric with Intimidate. Whenever a human deals damage to you, destroy it. Not super relevant, but if you're against like a white token deck, that can be. And all other non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Undying. Yes, Undying. So that means when they die, if they don't have a +1/+1 counter on it, put it back onto the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter. Ghave can then remove that counter and then sacrifice it again, and it'll come back. So with Ghave and Mikaeus and anything else with an ETB, you can start just looping them and just gaining a lot of value off of it. Next up, Risk the Redeemed for one Selesnya hybrid. Sorry, you get a 1/1 Elf Warrior with 2 and Selesnya hybrid. Tap it, put a 1/1 green and white Elf Warrior token onto the battlefield. Not super amazing, but not awful. There is one way at least to untap Risk, so you can do it multiple times, but it's really a next ability you really want. For 4 and 2 Selesnya hybrids, you put a token onto the battlefield for each token you have, so it doubles all tokens. So with Ghave, you can start just pumping out guys. There are ways of untapping him, so he just takes over the board if they just let him be. So next up, Runescar Demon, 5 and 2 black. You get a 6/6 demon with flying, and when it enters, you demonic tutor. Again, really nice ETB trigger to abuse, and if anything, it's a demonic tutor with a nice body attached to it. So next up, Soccer Tribe Elder for 1 and a green. You get a Snake Shaman 1/1. You can sacrifice it to search for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tap. Rampant Growth, always nice. And a free sack trigger just in case you have a butcher out or anything. You can do it at instant speed. And occasionally, late game, you just keep them alive. You don't get the land because the sack trigger is more useful. Next up, we're going to Seaborn Muse. For 3 and 2 green, you get a 2/4 Spirit with untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. So you get to play Magic on everyone else's turn. With Ghave, that's really useful because that way every turn you can start looping your Saproling for value. Again, with Risk to untap him every turn, he starts getting out of hand really quickly. Because by the time you get back to him, assuming he doesn't have Summoning Sickness, you'll have pumped out at least 4 guys, assuming you can get the 6 mana, of course. Turn is again, just really nice card. It lets you keep mana open, or it means you don't have to worry about keeping mana open, assuming they don't kill it in response. So, and with an artifact, and it also has some value with some other artifacts on money. Next up, Sheoldred Whispering One, 5 and 2 black for a Praetor 6/6 Swamp Walker. Beginning of your upkeep, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Another way to abuse ETB triggers in case you don't have anything else to do. And a really nice effect at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices the creature. This ability is really nice against like control decks, blue-red, and stuff that just doesn't really pump out a whole lot of creatures. This basically just stops them from playing creatures. So next up is Silklash Spider for 3 and 2 green, you get a 2/7 spider with reach, and for X and 2 green, it deals X damage to each creature with flying. So there's not a whole lot of flying in this deck, and this is almost one of the only ways to actually block flying. So in case your opponents are swarming you with angels or birds or whatever flying creatures, this gets rid of them really easily, and it's repeatable. So that's a good card. So next up is Spike Weaver for 2 and 2 green. It is a 0/0 spike. It comes into play with 3+1/+1 counters. For 2 and remove a counter from it, you can put a counter on something else. Not really relevant. I've never used it for that ability. But for pay 1 and remove a +1/+1 from it, you prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. That's what you want it for. It's a repeatable fog. Especially with Ghave out, you can start putting counters on it. It's really hard for the opponent to kill you in combat damage if you have Spike Weaver out. So that's why I put it in, because deal with the really aggressive, I want to kill you as fast as possible deck. It really gives the board itself time to basically kill them in response. Next up, Sun Titan 4 and 2 white for a 6/6 giant with vigilance. Whenever it attacks or enters the battlefield, you may return a permanent with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So I am running some cheap artifacts that this can recur, as well as like Soccer Tribe Elder or Fleshbag Marauder. So another way to get value. Next up is Wood Elves. Wood Elves is a 1/1 Elf Scout for 2 and a green. When it enters, you can search for a forest, put that card on the battlefield, and then shuffle. It grabs a forest card down to basic, so you can grab your shocks, of course, as well as it doesn't put it into battlefield. So it's almost like the 2-mana effect. And then next, Woodfall Primus, the card all my friends hate to see hit the battlefield. For 5 and triple green, you get a 6/6 Tree Folk Shaman with Trample. And whenever it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-creature permanent. And it has Persist. If the creature dies and it has no +1 or -1/-1 counters, it returns to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter. So Woodfall Primus and Cathar's Crusade. When Woodfall Primus dies, it'll come back with a -1/-1 and then get a +1/+1. When those two counters see each other, they're going to cancel each other out and disappear. That way, if you have Ghave or just another sacrifice outlet, you can loop that. The only thing you have to be careful for, Woodfall Primus is not a may, you must. But that's not really relevant if your opponents don't have any land at all. And if you have, say, like an Avacyn or something, you don't really care. That's all the creatures I'm running. Next we'll move up to artifacts. First up, Ashnod's Altar, 3 mana. You sacrifice a creature, you get 2 colorless to your mana pool. Nice card, free stack outlet. If anything, you can start. You can technically with Ghave ramp up in case you need to hit like your 7 drop, your 8 drop, but mainly part of the combo. But again, it also stops any of your features from being exiled because you can stack them in response. So it's a really nice card. Next up, Blade of the Blood Chief. It's a 1 mana equipment and equipped creature gets +1 whenever a creature you control, or whenever a creature is put into a graveyard. The equipped creature gets +1/+1 counter. If it's a vampire, it gets 2. So again, with Ghave, it nets token or nets counter. Sorry. Next up, we have Chromatic Lantern. 3 mana. Lands you control have tapped at 1 mana of any color, and you can tap it for 1 mana of any color. So again, as you can see through the deck tech, my deck is really greedy on the mana symbols. So this not only ramps, but it also fixes. So just really nice card to Next up, Elixir of Immortality. I started putting this into a lot more decks just to stop the milling, and just in case everything's already dead, you can at least shuffle it back in. So, uh, 1 mana artifact, you can pay 2, tap it, gain 5 life, and shuffle Elixir and your graveyard back into your library. So sometimes the life is relevant, most of the time it's not, but never a bad card to have. Next up, Mimic Vat, really fun card. 3 mana, you get an artifact with imprint. Whenever a non-token creature is put into the graveyard, you may exile that card. If you do, return any other cards exiled with Mimic Vat to the owner's graveyard. And you can pay 3, tap it, put a token onto the battlefield with a copy of the exiled creature. Gain haste, exiled at the beginning of the step. So, anything dies, let's say your opponent had a Woodfall Primus, and it didn't kill the Soul Ring. I don't know why. Or sorry, your Mimic Vat. You can imprint it and pay 3, get your own Woodfall Primus. Yes, it doesn't get the persist trigger, but it's still a good card. And with Parallel Lives, it puts a token, so it doubles all the tokens put in it. So really nice to get double activations out of it. Let's see. Next up, Nihil Spellbomb, 1 mana. You can tap it, sacrifice it, exile all cards from target player's graveyard, and if it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay a black, if so, draw a card. Really nice 1 mana artifact, get rid of the graveyard if they have a lot of recursion and it draws a card. With Sun Tightening, you can get it back, so really nice thing to have. Next up, Selesnya Signet, 2 mana artifact, pay 1, you add Selesnya. It's a ramp spell. My deck is a little higher on the cost, CMC cost, so at least this gives me something to do early game. Next up, Skull Clamp, everyone's favorite card. 1 mana art equipment, equipped creature gets +1/-1, and whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. Equip 1. Really good thing to have with Ghave. You can start clamping off your tokens to draw cards. Yes, you don't get the counter back, but drawing 2 cards for 2 mana, really nice. And that's 1 to equip and 1 to make it with Ghave. Next up, Soul Ring, 1 mana artifact, gets you 2 color. You really can't say no to a Soul Ring. Turn 1 Soul Ring, you win, I think, 20% more games if you have a turn 1 Soul Ring. Like, it's crazy. It's one of the best cards, if not the best card in the format. Next up, Swiftfoot Boost. 2 mana equipment, equipped creature has text boost and haste, equip 1. Again, to protect any of your creatures. If, let's say, Ghave needs to equip protection, Sholdred, Rift, Nicaeus, any of them. I don't run Lightning Greaves because the Shroud stops me from putting +1/+1 counters on it. So I didn't think it was really necessary. And then last up, Vidalcan Ori, 4 mana. You may cast non-land cards as if they have flash. So everyone probably knows about Prophet of Crucifix. It's been banned for a while now. But Vidalcan Ori and Seedborn Muse, you get your own Prophet of Crucifix. It's actually a little better, but it's one of the ways that instead of playing 1 round every turn, you get to play 4 rounds every turn, because every other player's turn is your turn, basically. That's going to finish it up with the artifacts. I'm going to go lands last just because I think that's my weakest section, so we'll go on to instant. First up, Beast Within, 2 and a green, destroy target permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 beast token. Permanent destruction at instant speed is nice. I don't want to be sitting there with a bunch of creature removal and a planeswalker is going ham, or an artifact, or an enchantment. So the beast is often not relevant. It often just gets sacrificed to either Living Death or one of my various edict effects. So next up, Aladam Recall, Selesnya, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, and put it in your hand. It's Demonic Tutor for a creature. Instant speed. it gets any of, like, you need a Sun Titan, you need a Wood Elf, you need a Spike Weaver, you need a Woodfall Promise. It just gets everything. Next up, Heroes Downfall 1 and 2 black for destroy target creature or planeswalker. I was debating putting Anguish Unmaking in this spot just because at least this way it hits everything, but it serves me pretty well, and it does get rid of planeswalker or creatures, so just make it a little more versatile. So I still want to do a little more playtesting and see. Next up, Frozen Grip, 2 and a green, split second, destroy target artifact or enchantment. It stops Sensei's Divining Top, and it stops blue players from stopping it. So I think almost every green deck needs to be running this. Next up, Past Exile, 1 mana, white. Exile target creature, controller may search for basic, put in the play tap. This really should be a sword to plowshares, but I don't have any at the moment, so it's a Past Exile instead. I might end up running both, I'm not sure. But 1 mana removal, exiles, it gets rid of Avacyn, it gets rid of Darksteel. So really nice. Next up, Return to Dust, 2 and 2 white, exile target artifact or enchantment. If you cast it during main phase, you may exile an additional one. So 4 mana, it exiles 2 artifacts or enchantments. Really nice card. It's really good value. And it does have instant speed, so you technically can do it on other people's turn, but you really want to get that extra value out of it. But next up, Celestia Charm. This is another thing I might Anguish Unmaking instead, but for Celestia, you get a charm that says choose one, target creature gets +2/+2 and trample until end of turn, or exile target creature with power 5 or greater, or put a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance on the battlefield. Almost always you're going to the exile power 5 because you're really playing this for the removal. Occasionally the trample will be relevant, but almost never. And next up, Utter End. 2 and black white for exile target non-land permanent. Again, a lot of things are running indestructible, and this just gets rid of everything, assuming you can target it, of course. And lastly, Worldly Tutor. 3 mana, search the library for a creature, put it onto the top of your library. Really nice card. Again, grabs me any of my silver bullets in my creatures. If anything, it can be used as a ramp spell. So, with that, I'll be moving on to lands. Now, I will have to admit, I'm not running the most optimal lands. My mana base is not perfect. I'm not running all the shocks. I'm not running all the fetches. So, bear with it. So we'll start off with the Jukabog, enters tapped, and exiles the graveyard. Sorry. Again, with Living End or Recursion, I have a few ways of picking up the Jukabog and replaying it for extra value. So it just does really what you want. Next up, Command Tower taps for any mana of your colors, of your commander's colors. Any commander that's not monocolor should be running this. Evolving Wilds. I do want the shuffle effect for, say, Sylvan Library and some other effects. So I don't have any other fetches, so this is what I'm running instead. You tap it, sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land, put them with absolute tap, then shuffle. Next up, 3 forests. Yep, 3 forests. Some might be wondering, but you have all this land ramp and you're only running 3 forests. Yeah, I mean, if late game you're casting ramp spells and there aren't any more basic lands, I think you're already winning. So, Gavany Township, taps to add colorless, and you can pay 2 and green-white to put a +1/+1 on each creature you control. Really nice effect if you want to go wide. It also, with Seaborn Muse, lets you do it again and again. So, just nice value. Golgari Guildgate, don't have a shock. This would be in place of it. It just adds black or green. The Rot Farm is the green black bounce land. Uh, there's not many strip mines or acid rain or just land destruction effects in the meta that I'm currently in, so I feel confident running them. And it lets me reset my Bajuka Bog, or I have some of the Scry lands, so it just lets me do it. Let me reset it. Next up, Grim Backwoods adds colorless, and for 2 it's black green. You can sacrifice a creature, draw a card. When in doubt, if you need to draw a card, you gotta do what you gotta do. Yeah, it's expensive and not super repeatable your without your Seedborn use, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Next up, the black green gain land. Again, fixing. Clean Garden gets you 0/1 plant. A body to block, an extra body to staff. Does what it needs to. Frozen Verge. This is actually a ramp effect. It enters tapped, it adds a colorless, and for 2, and tap it, sacrifice it, search for a forest card and a plains card. Puts them on the battlefield, tapped, and shuffle. So it lets you grab your shock. It lets you grab, assuming that you don't have your shocks out, it lets you grab any combination of them. So it's a good card. Next up, Opal Palace adds colorless, and for 1, tap it, add any mana, or add 1 mana of any color. If you cast your commander using this mana, it gets a +1/+1 equal the number of times you cast it so far from the command zone. So that way, if anything, you can use it as fixing, and with Ghave, it gives them extra +1/+1, which is always useful. Next up, the white-black bounce land. And my points are going to be the same for the bounce land, so I'm not really going to go over them. Guild Gate, same reason, don't have a shock, really should instead. But next up, plains, 2 plains. I'm not super heavy white. Yeah, I've got Navastin and I've got some other stuff, but there's a lot of other things that generate white mana, so I don't really need it as much as I do green or black. So, Reliquary Tower. Generally, you're not going to be over max hand size, but just in case you've got some sort of crazy, I don't know, Nekazar, or I don't know, you've hit a big decree of a decree of annihilation, but it just lets you not have to get rid of any cards. Also, in case someone has a Ginger Taxis, it stops you from discarding end of turn. So, Rupture Spire, and just tap, you pay 1 or sacrifice it. Fixing, I generally don't have much to do in the early turns, so if you get this out turn 2, you're not really hurting too much. Guild Gate, fixing, not super amazing, but you gotta run what you have. Sanctuary, green white bounce land. I already explained this. Next up is Stirring Wildwood, the green white man land. For 1 in a green white until end of turn, it becomes a 3/4 white and green elemental with reach. Surprise blocker. Most people don't look at the lands you have, so just in case you're thinking they're swinging in for lethal, you can block it. And it trades with, it blocks most flyers. It's not amazing, but it's not awful. Sun Petal Grove, white black, green white, check land. So, not bad. 4 swamps, something amazing. Temple Garden, the green white shock, the one I have, so it's the one I'm running. Temple of Silence, it scries the black white Scryland. I can reset it a few times if I need to. The scry is helpful. Again, my meta's not super fast, so I generally don't have to worry too much about playing the tap this is much tap land. Next up, Temple of the False God adds 2 colorless, only activated if you have 5 or more lands. This can be the 5th land, so even if you haven't cast any wrath spells, any ramp spells, sorry, it lets you have 6 mana on turn 5. Terramorphic Expanse, again, should be another fetch. It's not, but Transfield Promenade with another Rupture Spire. And then last up, Vitu Gaji, the City Tree. Tap that colorless, 2 green white, tap it to put a 1/1 green sapling creature onto the battlefield. Again, it's something to do in case you've been drawing lands and nothing is happening on the board. At least that's the way end the turn, make a 1/1. And that's it. That's my deck. So thank you for watching this video. I'm probably going to make a few more on my other commander decks. As always, links are going to be in the description. Thanks. I built this on Tapped Out, so thank you for Tapped Out for your, this isn't a sponsor, but thank you for making this wonderful website in which I can make all these decks. So, as always, hopefully I'll see you later. This is Hidden Planet X, and I'll signing out. So, see you later.